This content is brought to you by Fisher Improvement Technologies Online, a learning platform that includes self-paced courses, knowledge sharing, and networking opportunities for safety, quality, and performance improvement professionals. Join now for free at online.improvewithfit.com.
This show is brought to you by Safety FM.
Over 25 years helping leaders reducing errors and incidents. Here is your host of the Essential Leadership Cycle podcast, Rob Fisher.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another round of the Essential Leadership Cycle podcast. I'm your host and intentional leader, Rob Fisher. We've got a super treat today. Doug Pontsler is the managing director and chairman of the Center of Visual Expertise, COVE. And Doug and I go pretty far back. I'm going to let him introduce himself, tell you a little bit about his history and our history, and then we'll get right into it. So Doug, welcome. Thanks for carving this out of your time. I know you guys are getting ready for a summit, so to get you right now is a great treat.
Oh, that's awesome, Rob. I couldn't be happier to do it. So looking forward to our conversation.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, where you come from and what you've done. People probably don't know some of your past history and then what you're doing with COVE today.
Okay, well, awesome. Well, I'm an Ohio guy. Grew up in Northwest Ohio, went to Miami University, and believe it or not, studied accounting. Graduated with a degree in accounting from Miami, but went right to industry and spent roughly 23 years with Eaton Corporation. Through an acquisition, but with Eaton Corporation. And at Eaton, I served in accounting, finance, operations, purchasing, materials management, sort of roles over those years. And then in 2002, I left Eaton Corporation and joined Owens Corning. And when I joined Owens Corning in a role that was responsible for corporate services. Went from there to vice president of global sourcing, and then from there to vice president of environmental health and safety, and later added the role of operations sustainability to my responsibilities. So spent about the last 10 years at Owens Corning focused on, how we can protect and improve the environment, how we can, and most importantly, protect and serve our employees.
And I think we met originally on some serious injury fatality research work that was being done in combination with a bunch of different companies, Owens Corning and Exxon Mobil and Alcoa and a whole bunch of other people.
Yeah, we did. One of the things that I did, Rob, was soon after taking over the role of environmental health and safety, I looked for the sort of expertise that would help me understand what other companies were doing, so that I could take a look at what we were doing at Owens Corning and make sure that, number one, we were contemporary with the things that were going on in the profession, if they were relevant to what we were doing at Owens Corning. And I think it was through that National Safety Council link that you and I became acquainted and became friends. And it's been a wonderful relationship over that period of time. I think we have both focused on, what is it that we can do that really matters in being able to keep people safe. And I can tell you my time, and it continues today with COVE, focused on the safety of people, both in the workplace and at home, has been the most satisfying part of my professional career.
Well, and, there's something to be said for maybe it's ego, but when you really do help people with something that helps them, you just want to keep on doing that, even the developmental stages. So you said something about how you wanted to stay current. I'm not using the same word you used, but the reality is, as the optics, as the age of people that are in the workforce has changed, we've had to stay more current with how we talk to people, how we approach people, how we approach safety, how we get leaders to understand their role in people going home safe. Safety is that outcome.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think, there's a lot about safety that's important. And, it begins very much with the tactics and the fundamentals of what we do in the workplace and what we do at home in order to be able to provide the layers of protection so that, we don't encounter in a physical kind of way the sort of things that can hurt us. But there's a lot more to safety that's associated with how we engage our people and how they are part of the process. Because there's nobody knows their environment better than the people that work in it. And, there's times where, we do get awfully close to what we're doing, so we no longer sort of see the sort of things that are around us. And often when we have an incident, we may hear from someone that, I've walked by that 1,000 times and I never saw it. And it was those kind of realizations that I heard from our people, but also I experienced myself that really caught my ear when I heard about visual literacy. And that's really my mission today. And that is to share, what visual literacy has to offer all of us in terms of being able to not only see better, but be able to interpret better what it is that we're seeing. And from that, we can take actions that are more meaningful to achieving whatever it is we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, you may actually want to share with some of the folks that may not know it, what the history of visual literacy is. It sounds fairly, I don't even know what the phrase would be, but I know when I first heard it and you said, hey, Rob, you ought to come up and check out this visual literacy thing. I thought, art. Okay. All right. But just tell folks a little bit about where it came from and why it so applies. And I'm going to put my spin on it as well, why it so applies in people seeing risk today.
Yeah. Well, it's like many things in life, sometimes things happen a little, maybe accidentally or a little, on the fringe of what we're doing and we find relevance in it. But visual literacy is something that has been taught in art education for a long time, at least decades, if not centuries, in terms of being able to look at something and be able to draw meaning, be able to draw an interpretation. And in the art world, it's really trying to figure out a couple things. Number one, what was the artist trying to convey in the creation of whatever that particular object might be? And the second part is sort of what's our interpretation of that? How does it affect us? Is it something we like or we don't like, or does it bring meaning to our lives in some way that we might not have thought of before? And how it intersected with, safety was, it was just by accident back in 2015 that when I was at Owens Corning, we were working on really upscaling our hazard recognition and training program that we had put in place. And we'd had great success, teaching employees what the injury history is at Owens Corning, how they could learn from that to be more aware of the hazards that are in our environments, and be more sensitive to what they might encounter on a day-to-day basis that might result in interaction with a hazard. And I heard about this program that existed right in our backyard at the Toledo Museum of Art called Visual Literacy. And it was shorthanded as learning to see. And there was two things that really connected with me about learning to see, in this context. And one was what I referred to before. I sat through several hundred incident reviews over my period of time and this role at Owens Corning. And often I heard somebody say, that phrase, we walked by it and we just didn't see it. And the incident informed us that the hazard existed. And while it's important, certainly, that when we have an incident, that we get to the bottom of it and we determine what happened so that we can fix it, so it doesn't, cause another incident to occur. As important as that is, that's kind of a lousy safety management process if that's all you're relying on. We have to be preventive. We have to be proactive as well. And when I heard this learning to see, and in the context of the work that we were doing on upscaling that hazard recognition and training program that we have, I thought, well, maybe there's something here that can help us. Because if we think about the tasks that we execute and the work that we do, whether it's a big business, small business, doesn't matter what type of business, there isn't much that we do that doesn't begin with going out and actually looking at something and trying to determine, does it need fixed? Does it need protected? Does it, need this or that? It begins with looking. But looking doesn't always mean that we're seeing what's there. So, contacted the museum, and a couple people from the museum came over, and we sat down, and my question was, what's visual literacy? And their question was, what's safety? From a museum standpoint. I laugh about that today. I think we were both being a little fictitious, but maybe not much. And the more I learned about visual literacy, the more I started to appreciate the fact that just the natural neuroscience of the way that the brain works, when we look at something, we're really, really overconfident that we're seeing what's there.
Well, can I interject something?
Mm-hmm.
Because, we've all probably heard that 1,000 times, that I've walked by it 1,000 times, but I've never seen it. Probably the other 1,000 would be, I've seen that 1,000 times, but never interpreted it in the way that it could cause whatever it was going to cause. So you have those doubled up, and that's kind of the first two pieces of visual literacy is, can you really see it? And then are you interpreting it properly? Am I getting that right?
You got it perfectly. And, in today's environment, things are so fast and we have so much to do, and resources have been, tightened in many, many situations. We're all trying to speed up and get more things done. And there's risk in that because, if we go too fast, we no longer see what's in front of us. We go from just looking at it, believing we know what we're looking at and seeing, and taking action as a result of that. Years ago, we used to call that leaping to a conclusion or leaping into an action, before we really understood what was in front of us. And when we do that, it opens up the possibility for error in a big way, and all kind of errors. It could be a quality issue, it could be a safety issue, it could be a productivity issue. But slowing down in today's world isn't necessarily the most popular thing to say, but it's one of the most important things that we can do.
I think we like to say it a lot, but I don't know that we teach people how to do that very well. We just tell them to do something that, number one, isn't natural for humans to do, or most humans anyway, and number two is really pretty difficult depending on where your brain is at on whatever task you're working on. I heard something you said earlier, and I wanted to circle back to it because it made me think that, the art is usually separated from science. And a lot of times we approach safety from only a science perspective. But what it sounds like is that if there's an art to work, and that the things that we can learn things from the art world related to how we see and manage safety, that if we're only closed off and we make it just an engineering thing, we're probably going to miss some of those amazing attributes that you guys have started to uncover.
Yeah, I think one of the real lessons that came out of sort of our initial work in understanding what visual literacy was, and then sort of translating sort of the key processes and the tools and the techniques that artists and art appreciators and others have used to really be able to understand what artists are trying to convey. We found real application in the workplace by applying those tools, the same way we would look at a painting. When we look at a painting, we're trying to look for the detail. We're trying to look for the content, of that particular image, and what was the artist trying to convey to us by bringing those sort of things together. And to be successful in being able to do that, we have to see a level of detail that we can draw some conclusion from. The same's true when we walk into a work environment. What is it that we see? What are the details, that we begin to appreciate? I'm a big proponent of really thinking about hazard recognition in two steps, and that is, number one, what is it that we see? What are the objective facts that exist in this environment? Perhaps it's a piece of equipment, perhaps it's a production line. And once we sort of have an inventory of the objective things that we're seeing, we can then assess, and we've got all the safety tools in the world to be able to assess whether a particular thing that we identify represents a legitimate risk or not, or a high risk, and the action that we take then, can be pretty definitive. It's something that perhaps we can wait and fix at a later time, or maybe it doesn't need to be fixed at all. Something that we can contain and continue to operate safely, or something that we have to stop work right immediately because there's an immediate issue that could cause harm to people or property. And being able to use those tools from visual literacy to be able to see objectively those things in the workplace that we can then assess in terms of the risk that they represent is right in line with what we've been trying to do from a safety standpoint forever.
Well, and I think that's where the human performance, human organizational performance, the advanced error reduction convergence really happens, is that visual literacy makes you so good at being able to see the triggers. And then human performance, advanced error reduction, makes sure that you know what that trigger applies to. So now you're not just recognizing that a hazard may exist, but you're recognizing the characteristics of the hazard, even performance hazards. So, one of the things you and I have talked about is from a personality tendency perspective, if you just leave people to their own devices and you don't give them a tool, half of the personalities will tend to see people before conditions, and the other half will see conditions before people. They actually have to be trained to see the thing that their brain isn't naturally wired to see.
Oh, that's so true. And we do exercises that where we'll look at imagery, whether it's a painting or whether it's a workplace image, and without any sort of guidance in terms of tools and techniques that can improve our visual acuity, we ask people, what is it that you see? And, a couple things are certainly true. No one sees everything the same way. We may see similar things, but there's also other things that we don't necessarily see. And, our natural tendency when we look at something is really influenced by our experiences, our expectations, and our biases, which causes us just to sort of frame out certain things and pay attention to others. And you highlighted a couple of them. We tend to be drawn to faces, we tend to be drawn to people, we tend to be drawn to bright colors. But we may miss, the predator that's over in the corner just because that's not normally, where we pay attention. And so, our task with visual literacy in the workplace is to really take the familiar and make it unfamiliar. And if we're able to do that, then we're able to see things that we might not normally see.
Yeah, the other thing I love about what you guys are doing is that it fits in almost anything that people are already doing. It's teaching people how to see what you're already asking them to see. It's teaching them to see that better so that you can interpret what it is, so you can learn from those things. And that's why I love our relationship and how we've done some of our webinars. Just to plug those webinars that Doug and I have done on visual literacy and human organizational performance are out there for you to watch. But where do you see it going next? COVE is going to be this factor in safety for a long time. Where do you see things going next?
Yeah, it's a great question, Rob. And I think, maybe to fill in a blank here, COVE is part of the Toledo Museum of Art. Is the museum realized as we work to make this connection between what was being taught in art education and how it could apply to industry. The Toledo Museum of Art saw the opportunity to be more relevant to industry in a different kind of way. And that was through the application of visual literacy with an initial focus on safety. And so it's that intellectual horsepower that resides in art education that we've been able to transfer to application from an industry perspective. I think we've been at it for about 2.5 years as COVE, as an enterprise that's focused on that. I think we have just absolutely scratched the surface. One of the things that we say at COVE is that, it's one thing to intellectually know something, like anything associated with safety. I mean, you can be the smartest guy in the world around the procedures associated with confined space entry or guarding equipment or whatever you want to name. But if you go into the workplace and you can't see it, if you can't see those gaps, you can't see those hazards, then that intellectual knowledge, kind of goes to waste with a failure to apply. So what we do is we really encourage people not to think about visual literacy as a program, but rather think about visual literacy as building skill and capability in the individuals that perform, key safety processes for your organization. So if you have people that are focused on risk assessment, hazard identification, incident investigation, design for safety reviews, I mean, you just go right down the list of all these important things that go on, by safety professionals. Being visually literate actually improves our ability to execute those processes more successfully.
Right.
So, for us, it continues to be building out the relationship between visual literacy and how it better supports key safety processes that we have.
So do you think that visual literacy should be limited to being taught in education in the art world, or do you think that we ought to be pushing for, universities that really do safety and safety engineering to make visual literacy a piece of their curriculum?
Well, I think it should be strengthened and broadened in terms of, its presence in core education. Our prior director of the museum always talked about visual literacy as a form of critical thinking, which is exactly what it is. We are slowing down. We're slowing from our fast brain to our slow brain. We're following a structure. We're following a discipline in terms of how we look at something and what we see. And from what we see, how we interpret what that means. And those are all attributes that are critical in safety, but they're also critical in other aspects of work that we do as well, whether it's quality or any form of engineering, any form
not limited to safety for sure.
Not at all. Not at all. We've got a lot of runway in safety to make a difference, but we have runway in other areas as well. And my hope is that over time, COVE will answer the bell in all those areas.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it only makes sense, and again, that's another intersection of visual literacy and human performance or human error reduction. Is that it's one thing to be critical thinking. It's quite another to know whether you are in rule-based performance mode with that critical thinking or in knowledge-based performance mode, so that you can deploy different tools based on what mental model or what performance mode you're in. So there's just so many ties. I really have appreciated our ability to, the term we use, integrate these into the way they're portrayed in a way that doesn't really stop. It doesn't. There isn't a real endpoint for people.
Yeah, and I've also been really, really happy about the level of engagement that providing visual literacy training to employees, to our peers, et cetera, has been received as well. Because, let's face it, it's not often that people go to safety training and they leave going, wow, that was fun and that was innovative and all those sort of attributes. And that is what we hear when we talk about the application of visual literacy to, our safety processes. It's new and different. And if we can utilize what's new and different and innovative to build skills and capabilities in our individuals, that is, and in ourselves, there's nothing more engaging than that. And I'm really proud of being associated with something that also associates with engaging our employees.
So are you able to deliver virtually? You can't really take companies to the museum right now. Are you able to deliver virtually, and how's that working for you during the pandemic?
Yeah, we absolutely are. Like everyone else, what a challenging time, it's been. And we began this journey of visual literacy training using traditional museum techniques. And that is, we would bring people to the museum. We'd spend about half of our time in the galleries, utilizing works of art to be able to teach the principles of visual literacy. And then we would move into the application of those principles using workplace examples, workplace imagery, in order to be able to teach application. And it was a wonderful experience for people. I mean, there's nothing like, getting out of your normal environment. And for most of us, including me, when this all began, I wasn't the guy that was going to a museum, with any frequency for the purpose of appreciating the art that was there. And people that have had the opportunity to come to the museum or other environments where we have done the training, they've really enjoyed, that opportunity. But, COVID certainly put a stop to the opportunity for, number one, people to travel. I think we've reached a point where we could certainly deliver it safely. But, people's inability, and rightfully so, to travel, caused us to quickly pivot and be able to deliver that same content, but using virtual tools to be able to do it. And I'm really proud that we've been able to assemble, an approach that delivers the learning outcomes that we were delivering in the museum. We're just doing it in a different way and in a different environment.
Yeah. Well, and I think having that, arrow in your quiver for the future, don't know if either one of us would have really gone there all in had it not been for the condition that we're in the country and in the world. But I don't think we'll ever come back from it because it can be so powerful. You can put 70 people in learning where you may be able to gather 15 together in person. So
it started out being kind of scary to think about such a significant change in such a short period of time. But, the more that we thought about it, and I know you think about it the same way, it creates the opportunity to scale in a way that we can have positive impact faster.
Yeah.
And that's what we want to do.
Good. Well, Doug, I really appreciate it. Is there anything I should have asked you about that I didn't?
Oh, shoot. It's an interesting proposition in terms of most people thinking about how an art museum, can help them with their safety program. And what I would say about that is give it a try. There's a lot happening, in our world today, in your world today, where we're bringing things into the workplace that are coming from very non-traditional places. And that's necessary to be able to build on the core that has already been, leveraged for a long period of time to continue to fuel continuous improvement in what everyone's striving for, and that is a safe workplace. So visual literacy just fits into that bucket where you don't have to give anything up, but you have the opportunity to be able to build on what you have and have some fun along the way.
Yeah. Well, Doug, thanks very much for carving out this time. Again, I know your summit's coming up, and just tell people how they can get a hold of you and your company before we close out.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. We would, our website is www.covectr.com. And we have a tremendous amount of information on our website, including blogs and white papers and some case studies and so forth. And I'd really encourage you to visit the website and see what you can learn. And we'd love to see you in a workshop or in a conversation at a later time.
All right. Thanks, Doug. I really do appreciate it. I've been your host and intentional leader, Rob Fisher. Thanks again to Doug Pontsler. And remember, intentional leadership starts with you.
The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are those of the host and its guest and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the company. Examples of analysis discussed within this podcast are only examples. They should not be utilized in the real world as the only solution available, as they are based only on very limited and dated open source information. Assumptions made within this analysis are not reflective of the position of the company. No part of this podcast may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means, mechanical, electronic, recording, or otherwise, without prior written permission of the creator of the podcast, Jay Allen.